Okay, so the first thing, right, in terms of the Brundtland report, just to remember where it came from, right? So the driving force was sustainable, was a driving force for sustainable development. So I suppose we should talk about unsustainable development first. Okay, okay, so if you have an A4 page, maybe do it along with me. Okay, so the issue, if you like, the Brundtland Commission stemmed from the problems with unsustainable development. Now, first of all, what sort of fed into unsustainable development, right? So I'm going to just do arrows to show what fed into it, what caused development to be unsustainable. So can you, anybody recall what the issues were? What sort of activities were making development unsustainable? Should I pick on someone? Sean? If I start you off. Right, one of the things was industrialization or in economic activity, okay? So sort of rapid, and this applies to both the West, the emerging and developed economies. So industrialization was causing unsustainable development. Can you think of another factor that was causing unsustainable development? Shay? Yes, absolutely. So consumer demand, right? Okay, so more goods and services being used, right? And the last one was the increasing population, exactly, very good. So population growth. So all of these factors were feeding into this unsustainable development. Okay, now what was the impact of unsustainable development? What is the issue with unsustainable development? I've got 3 written here, and I think they were all in your notes. They were on actually the first graphic organizer I gave you yesterday. If I start you off, climate change. Right, so climate change is an output, if you like. So unsustainable development causes climate change or can be related to it. Anything else? Aaliyah, can you think of anything else? Overexploitation of? Yeah, or natural resources generally. Yeah, fossil fuels being one of them, but overexploitation. I can't fit this on. Right, overexploitation of natural resources, including fossil fuels, but also minerals, metals, you know, anything at all. Food, water. Right, okay, and the last one was a scarcity of resources. I didn't spell scarcity right. Okay, scarcity of resources. Can you all see that? Sorry, my pen is a bit fat. Okay, so you've got industrialization, right? So consumer demand, population growth, and industrialization fed into caused unsustainable development, and the outcome of that is climate change, overexploitation of natural resources, and a scarcity of resources, right? So that's the issue. Okay, so what came from that? Okay, so remember that sort of concern about unsustainable development led ultimately to the Brundtland report. And what was the actual title? It's often, you can get away with calling it the Brundtland report, but actually the name of the Brundtland report was what? Our common. Did you not have a look at it yesterday? Well, today you can. Okay. So remember the actual title. It's not titled Brundtland report. It's just that's its kind of common name. So the actual heading of this book, their report was Our Common Future. All right, just be aware of that. Okay, so right, let's look at the sort of the background to the Brundtland report. So obviously the concerns about unsustainable development led to the Brundtland report, but who set up the Brundtland report, or who is ultimately established, or who tried to coordinate nations in this? What worldwide organization ultimately tried to coordinate a response to unsustainable development? The United Nations. So let's put the UN wanted to brought right nations together. Okay, so that was a driving force. It was the UN, right, and they set up if I could just do an arrow down there, what was the actual name of the organisation that published the Brundtland report? Check your notes, the first page of the notes if you're not sure. Brundtlands Commission, or the WCED, very good. It was called the WCED, and its common name, now WCED, this will have to peek at my notes, that stands for World Commission on Environment and Development. So if you put that in, right, the WCED, World Commission on Environment and Development, and it was commonly known as the Brundtlands Commission. Okay, why was it called the Brundtlands Commission? Is Brundtland the place where it was held? Who was Brundtland? She was the Norwegian Prime Minister. Very good. So she was the chair of this organisation, and it produced, right? It was the organisation that produced the Brundtland report. Okay, now what? Okay, so that was published in 1987. Okay, so I'll just put here 1987 just to give you an idea of the timeline. I think it was the WCED met first in 1983. Okay, and what was the outcome of the Brundtland report? I'm glad I did this. Right, what did they actually? First thing they produced was a definition of what? Sustainable development. Now I'm not going to write it all out here. I have it. Right, so they produced the definition of sustainable development, which is, could you read out this sustainable development definition, Liam? You're all lonesome at the back today. On the first page of the notes. It's in bold. You see it on page 1 of the notes? These notes here, which I hope you got. No, it's this bit here. Kind of development that. That's it, exactly. Thank you, Liam. Okay, so that's the definition. So that was, and as I say, that's still in use today. So that's the definition of sustainable development that is used now in 2020 as well. Okay, now in terms of, let's see, what else have I got here? Okay, now just to be aware that the Brundtland Commission, really, the Brundtland report focused on 3 areas, right? They were interested in social equality. Okay, so you could read the whole report, but this is the crux of it, if you like, right? The issues they dealt with were social equality. This is what they thought was required for sustainable development. Okay, social equality, what else we got? Environmental protection. Right. Environmental protection. And the last one was economic growth. Now, remember that this was all set up. This isn't going to be anything politically radical. This was all within the framework of our existing system, right? So economic growth. So the idea is that you would still have economic growth. You would have more social equality. In other words, less of a gap between rich and poor globally. And you would protect the environment. You would conserve natural resources and so on. Okay, and you would do that. So governments would work to do these 3 things. Now, actually, only one of those really has survived, if you like. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so what was the result? What organizations then used the Brundtland report? I'm going to move to another yoke here. So I'm just going to I'm going to change color pen. I do apologize, only because I'm right. Right, so I'm just putting an arrow down from, let's see, okay, from the Brundtland report. Okay, and we've got here, and it's on page 1 of your notes, what big meetings were held that stemmed from the Brundtland report or the Brundtland Commission? the Earth summits. Okay, so stemming from the Brundtland report were the Earth summits. Now on page 1 of your notes, it's just listed a couple. The very first Earth summit was when? 1992, which was the one in Rio de Janeiro. Okay, so you had 1992 in Rio. You can write it all. Okay, and then the next one was, or the next one that's mentioned there, obviously there's a, I don't know if they have had, the next one was 1997, and that was in New York. Okay, okay, so that's just an example. So you had Earth summits, right? That was an outcome from the Brundtland report. So just be aware of where they connect in. Okay, and you also had, well, we're not going to, you can read about the Earth summits, but just be aware that they exist. We don't really focus on them much. Just to say that the Earth summits would have been concerned about all 3 strands from the Brundtland report. In other words, social equality, environmental protection, and economic growth. But at this point, really, it was environmental protection that was starting to come to the fore, right? Focus started to be on environmental protection. Okay, so everything really since has all been about environmental protection. Environmental protection, and particular, yeah, environmental protection, including mitigating climate change. So now we're at the Kyoto Protocol, right? So the Kyoto Protocol, again, stemmed from that whole drive towards sustainable development, but really you can see the focus is now narrowing down to mitigating climate change. So as I say, the Brundtland report had this sort of vision of, you know, social equality, economic growth, environmental protection. The Earth summits kind of focus more on the environmental protection, and then you've got to the Kyoto Protocol where it's really just climate change. Okay. Now the Kyoto Protocol, can you recall? Now we've seen that before connected to another sort of organization that's under the UN. Can I remember what other organization fed into the Kyoto Protocol? And it was in the very first topic. The IPCC. Do you remember that? The IPCC, right? Its second assessment report, okay, was used to help to set up the Kyoto Protocol. Okay, if you remember, do you remember what IPCC stands for, Charlie? It's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Okay, so jot that down in your notes if you don't remember. Okay, so just to be aware of where all these things kind of connect. I think sometimes it's not really obvious when you just read notes. Okay, now can anybody remember one of the mechanisms? Sorry, yes. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I didn't realize. Oh, I didn't realize I'd knocked it. Sorry about that. Sorted? Okay. Now, can anybody recall one of the mechanisms from the Kyoto Protocol that we've already studied? Do you know, Aaliyah? What is, can you name one of the mechanisms from the Kyoto Protocol that for lowering greenhouse gas emissions that we've already looked at? It was actually one of the questions at the beginning of class. Oh no, maybe it wasn't. It wasn't. Does anybody recall? The turbine? Pardon? Is it like the wind turbine? No, it wasn't that. It was. This is a trading mechanism. Actually, was the question. Carbon trading. Carbon trading, right? Remember that one of their mechanisms. Okay, so that's how that came. Okay, and the last thing we're going to mention that again you're going to read about today is the COP, the Conference of Parties. Which is shortened to COP. Now these are annual meetings. And if we just give an example, e.g. COP15, which was the Copenhagen, I have links in your notes for that. So some of the COP meetings, conferences of parties, come up with really, radical ideas and sign-ups, and some of them don't. The last really useful one was COP21, which was in Paris, and it was when the US signed up to lowering carbon emissions. So the US had never signed up. The US is very reluctant, being the largest, remember, the largest producer of greenhouse gases on this planet, massive, like 4 times the average what a European produces. But that was under Barack Obama, and then we had Donald Trump, and he's just pulled out of it all. So why don't you have a little mask break for a couple of minutes? That's all I'm going to put on that. And then we go down, after you've done, we'll go down. So 2 minutes, I'm going to put something on Google Classroom. That's not fast. What are you missing?